What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch making some money investing in fractional real estate online as usual. Looking at the most recent Lofty listing that's been put up for sale. It's pretty popular already. There's been, I think they put 1,700 tokens up for sale and have sold over 200. So they're moving pretty fast compared to some of the more recent ones. Um, get into the property, do some, the due diligence that we usually do, and try to figure out why. Um, One of the things, this is, a different model. We've seen a couple of these properties where it's a person living in the home. They're trying to access some of the equity. So they list it on Lofty. They sign an agreement to pay a rent basically that will equal a specific yield to the token holders each year. And then also they have the ability, well, they're forced to buy it back at the end of 10 years, at $60 per token, which they're calling a 20% appreciation, um, which I guess technically is true, but it's certainly not how I would think about it. And they're saying an appreciation rate of 2%, and I don't really think that's accurate. And I'll show you the math on that and what I'm talking about. I mean, it is adding 2% of 50 per year, but there's no compounding going on, right? So it's a simple. It's just $1 each year gets you from 50 to 60 over that 10-year period of time. But I'm gonna do a little math on this and on the yields, um, and see like what does that really get us? But in essence, what we're doing here is we're giving what looks like a home equity loan in function, not in form, to this homeowner, right? They want to get some cash now. They're going to pay us a little bit over time. Sometime in the future they're going to pay it back, and we'll have made some return. So the first thing I'm going to do, jump into the collateral, right? I think that's what for me it's the most important thing. It's why I invest in real estate and real estate debt. Not that this is technically debt, but it's very much behaving like it. And so one of the reasons that I like it, real estate debt, is that we get to, our collateral is easy to value. They've got the appraisal on file. Okay, 441,000. So we're talking about, and then there's already a mortgage in place, right? 282,000. And so we're selling the equity. And so you want, one of the things, they're only forced to keep 10%. And so if they wanted to continue to sell, and it's 10%, I believe, of the outstanding equity, right? And so if they wanted to sell uh, uh, 90% of the outstanding equity, and let's say, I don't know exactly what their current leverage is. Let's see, 465. But actually, I think the appraisal says 441. Yeah, so 441. But they're doing 465 because Lofty will let you bring it to market at up to, and it's at up to a 5% premium to the current most recent appraisal, and then plus cost, right? So it's actually this 463. So let's see, 281 divided by 463. It's 60% levered. So if they sell 90% of the remaining 40%, they could have only 4% left in this property, right? So they could be getting up to 96% leverage essentially, um, at the rates that we're providing here, right? And whatever, and I'm going to do the math for you on what that rate actually looks like, because they say it's $15 or 15% in year one, 12.5 in year two, 10% in year three, 7.5, from that point forward. So that plus the appreciation that they're paying, um, we're gonna put that together and figure out what that looks like. But first, I want to look at the collateral, and then figure out what we can look at about the borrower. Because if we're analyzing, what's essentially, acting as a home equity loan, I want to know what the collateral is. So we got the appraisal. It's a pretty simple single family home. It said 441. They're letting them put a 5% premium on that. Okay, so selling out higher. When I was looking at Zillow, Zillow had it at quite a bit lower. I don't love that, right? I mean, that doesn't, and I couldn't really, I was looking at a couple of different things. I couldn't really tell why. So right away that worries me a little bit. Maybe we're undervalued on our collateral. And one of the things, you might say, well, oh, they're only selling out a portion of their equity, right? And so we're not really getting up to that higher loan to value, but it's not really how it works on here because um, their tokens they retain are their portion of ownership as well. And so, if there were a situation where it were liquidated, and then they paid off the loan, whatever's left over, it gets divided per token, right? And so it's not as if, well, if they only sold 10,000, you only need 10,000 over the 281. You'd still, in any situation where you had a liquidation of the property where it was sold in the real world, for less than the current market cap, plus fees, uh, you would you'd end up losing money on it, right? And so I do care about the valuation. I don't love that, right? So that's right off the bat one of the things. Um, but a lot of times I will trust. Oh, let me get rid of that ad. I'll trust the appraiser more than I'll trust something like Zillow. But this is just a weird home to really have that big of a discrepancy. I was a little bit surprised. But I want to jump into the market. It's Columbia, Missouri. It's not a market I know anything about. Looks like it's the home of the University of Missouri, Mizzou maybe, Mizzou, probably Mizzou. I don't know. But it is, so college town. It's not a huge market, right? 130,000 people. I think I looked up the enrollment in that university, and it's around 30,000 people. So it makes up a big portion of the base. You've seen really strong population growth here, so I like that a lot. One of the things that I thought was interesting, though, is when I was looking at this, the student population has been going down for quite a while. So we're quite a bit below the peak, although it looks like maybe it's going back up. Oh no, that's the average. So this is the most recent. So yeah, we're pretty steadily moving down. Oh, it went up, up, up there. Um, but they were at 35,000 at one point. Now we're at 31. So whenever you have such, one entity that represents such a big portion of the economic drivers in a town, that worries me when they're have shrinking enrollment. Now, on the other side of it, you've had this huge growth, right? So it's tough to really know what's going on there. It's not something I spent a ton of time on, but if I were going to invest in this property, any significant, amount, I'd want to really understand like what's really happening in this market. How are there less people going to the biggest university in the market that's obviously making up a large portion, um, of the economic base of this city, and at the same time, that's shrinking, but our population is still growing very fast. So it's pretty interesting. I don't know the answer, but I think if that were the only issue, I don't know that it would stop me, but it is, one of a couple other issues I'm going to bring up too. So let's see. Let's close that. Spot crime was kind of funny. It had this. It didn't have a whole bunch. I've never seen one that had so many of these just little question marks. And a lot of them, when you click on them, you don't really get anything. So my guess is the way that a lot of stuff is reported, um, it doesn't transfer well onto the system. So I think probably using another software or another data set would be helpful. I didn't do it for this. I'm gonna, I think you can probably tell. I already decided I'm not investing in this one, but I think it's really comes down to the structure and the numbers. So I'm kind of going through this quick. I'm gonna show you that. Yeah, I did see this shooting here, but when you clicked on it, it just said somebody reported hearing a shooting. You can get a lot of those in the area because of fireworks or accident, or who knows what it is, but sometimes you get those calls. It is something that I wouldn't just take this at face value. I'd want to do a little bit more digging into the local crime if I were going to put some money into this deal. I looked at this was actually one of the lower risk areas of all the ones we've looked at. Um, and I think that There's some tornado risk, some high winds risk, but in general, not a whole lot of natural disaster risk. So, that is one thing this place definitely has going for it. I looked up the flood map; it looked perfectly fine there. Um, so, the collateral, it's questionable, right? I mean, the appraisal looked good, obviously, although it's a premium to the appraisal. And then when you add in on top of that um, that Zillow thinks it's worth significantly less. I don't love that. But then the other thing, when I'm looking at a loan, I always want to look at the borrower too, right? And if this is a situation where they did give us the credit score, they gave us a credit karma score, and it's very good credit. Um, but we don't have any information about this person's income, right? And that's what, like, those are the two things I want. I want to know what's their credit look like, and I want to know their ability to repay. But as far as I know, they don't give us anything. And let me look back at the documents, but I don't think they give us anything to give us an idea about that. Let's check it out. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't remember seeing anything, but I looked at this early this morning and then just came back to it, or not early, but early for me this morning. So let's see. Appraisal, inspection report, insurance policy, lease agreement, title report, loan docs, and there was nothing in there. Yeah, loan agreement, mortgage statement. So yeah, really, really nothing that makes me feel comfortable about their ability to pay whatsoever. Now, obviously, this is important to understand. They have a really low interest rate on this home. It makes it obvious why they're not just refinancing to take cash out, right? Because one of the things, whenever I see these deals on Lofty where it's like, we're acting basically as a home equity loan, or we're, giving them access to their equity, I always want to know, well, why aren't they just doing a refinance? Because that's an easy and very straightforward way to get your money out, if you have good credit and have the money. Um, but not wanting to pay off a 2.25% rate gives you a really good understanding of why they might want to do something a little bit different. And why they don't have the option for a second mortgage, I don't know. And that's one of the things that worries me a little bit. Some markets, second mortgages or home equity lines of credit just are not as available as others. They do have, relatively low leverage on this if you believe the appraisal. So you'd think they'd have some ability to be able to pull some money out with a more traditional method. So that's one thing that makes me a little bit nervous. Like, why would they do this? And then so they gave us a link to the person. This is just a link to their yeah, right here, to their, is this it? I don't know, to their LinkedIn. So we could at least see what he does. Okay, he's a project manager. That doesn't really tell me a whole lot. Um, so what is it? Self-employed, 3 months. Okay, full time, 3 months. Is this over? To present. So this is maybe still going on. So it looks like he's got, like, maybe this is a side job and this is his main job, right? And so maybe I could do some research and figure out, how much he's actually getting paid, or what the average person in that role gets paid. If I really wanted to do a little bit more, but one of the things, when we're really just counting on owners to be the one that are making these payments, I don't really understand why we don't try, why Lofty doesn't just go ahead and get some of that info, because it'd make me feel a whole lot more comfortable. All of the yield that I'm counting on getting from this is coming from, this owner, and so why not, give me some info to be a little bit comfortable about that. So that's all we get there. And so really what I wanted to do, though, is just jump into the math of this, right? So I want to look at a couple different things. So one, and I want you to know, I'm doing a simple IRR. The reason I'm not doing XIRR and trying to really get too granular is because with the daily payments, where we get paid daily rent payments, I'd have to have 365 to, 3,650 um, entries, right, over 10 years, one for every single one. And I just, the difference between XIRR and IRR, especially over a 10-year period, is usually just not that big. And so, although I think in general you'd expect these returns to be a little bit higher if we did that, than doing it the way we're doing it here. I think it's not going to be a big enough difference to be meaningful for us. So I just stuck with doing a straight IRR. Um, and so all I did is I set up the initial investment. This is the $50, and then buying it with the fees and the operating reserve. Um, that's taken out. And one of the things that I don't really understand what happens in these situations is where that money goes, because they're taking care of the property. So when Lofty collects that, I'm not sure where that 2.5% goes. So that's one of the things. Maybe we get that back at the end, and then there's a little bit more of a pop. But it's never been made clear to me. I've asked the question a few times, where that goes. I don't know. But so we're just I'm just I know it gets taken from me when I buy those tokens. I don't see it ever coming back, and so I'm just assuming that's how it goes. If that weren't the case, your returns would be a little bit higher. But so, and I just modeled it out, right? 15% in year one, 12.5 year two, 10% in year three, 7.5% for every other year. And then I looked at what if we sold it at the end of each of those years, right? And so added $60 to whatever the sale year period is. And so if we did this deal and then they happen to decide to pay it back in year one, at the end of year one, you're getting a 28.75% return. That'd be a fantastic return. But I can't imagine a scenario where they'd want to do that, right? Because their money is only getting cheaper over time. So their base case, and like if you believe what they said, they want to stay there forever. Um, their base, if they hold it for the full 10 years, pay off the $60 at the end of pay the $60 plus all the payments. If I bought it today, I'd be making about a 10.5% total return over the whole time period. Um, it's not terrible, but it is, it's also not an amazing return, right? And the same, it doesn't get much better until, you get into the mid-teens if they pay it off in 4 or 5 years. If they paid it off the first year, obviously you do really well. First, second, or third year, I'm pretty happy with those returns. But, anything longer than that, and it really starts to, I start to think, why would I invest in this deal versus a ground floor loan, right? If you think about the ground floor loans that we get to invest in, you're anywhere between typically 10.5 and 13.5, sometimes 14% interest rate. And so, if they end up holding this for any longer period of time, that's the return you're getting or lower. Um, and you don't get the diversification of getting to spread it around a whole bunch of those loans, because there's only a couple of deals like this on Lofty. And so it is hard for me to want to put very much money in something like this when I'm not getting a huge return. And it is, in my mind, this is a more speculative investment than investing in a mortgage instrument, right? Like this is not, even though, I know Lofty thinks, well, we have more control over this. I think in the end, if the owner defaulted on the rent, and Lofty decided, okay, we're going to claw back the tokens like the agreement gives them the right to do. I think that it could very likely turn into a lawsuit. And at the end of the day, how this whole agreement is looked at, we have no idea, right? It's a completely untested setup. They've never actually, at least as far as I know, had to foreclose or take back tokens from a defaulted owner. And so, and I'm fairly certain it's never been tested in court, right? And so, um, and I don't think they have to go through a judicial process to make it happen, but I think they could go through the process and then it could be challenged, right? They could take the tokens, and then the owner could be in a situation where they might bring a lawsuit, and then against the DAO, and then we'd have a situation. Um, we'd be in a completely new situation. And I wasn't an attorney for very long, and so I'm not giving any legal advice. But one thing that I think that I do know is I never want to be involved in a lawsuit where there's not really clear law on my side, right? And so it's not a situation where if I had to put a bunch of money in a deal like this, or put a bunch of money into a mortgage, a note and mortgage, I would take the note and mortgage every time if my returns were similar. Um, just because of the certainty of it, because of it's just much more easy to to understand what's going to affect the outcome of that situation versus this. I really don't know. And, add to that I don't really have any information about the current owner's income. I know they've got, good credit. We got pictures of the home. It looks like they keep the home really nice. I have questions about the collateral, so that's not great. So the only thing that might get me excited to jump into this is that if I thought there was some good chance that they're going to pay off in the early years, right? Because then I'm getting paid extra to do this type of deal versus, buying mortgages on ground floor. But, there's no indication that they want to pay it off early. And so, what do I think a catalyst could be? Like, if interest rates dropped and they could do a traditional refinance and pay this off in such a way that it reduces their overall, cost, well, that would work for them. But it's really hard to imagine that would be the case, because to pay this off, you're paying that, the extra $10 per token. It's a 20% return right up front. I mean, that's what's creating this big return up front. But at the same time, it is. Sorry about that. Just had a little technical difficulty. All I was saying is, that extra $10 per token is what creates this large return up front, but it's also creates a very large impediment for them to want to create, make that payoff. And so I think it's very unlikely that you do get this buyback at $60 anytime in the early years. And I think, absent, I especially think this is true because their current rate is extremely low, right? They're paying 2.25%. So even at, let's say rates drop down to 5%, okay, if they wanted to refinance and do a traditional refinance, the blended rate, I think on this would still be, because they have that very low interest rate, depending on how much they've sold into this program, into this structure. um, I don't think they'd be saving money to do a traditional refinance, cash out, and pay us off, right? So I think it's very unlikely that you get one of these early payout years and get a big return. And so once you sort of discount that quite a bit, um, then I'm just stuck with, okay, I'm getting a, very low double digit return on something that looks a lot like second mortgage debt. And that's the other point, right? Like when I'm buying mortgages on ground floor, that's a first mortgage. Now, at the same time, it's a first mortgage on a new construction or a fix and flip. And so, um, that adds a little bit of risk. But on the flip side, it also is, much lower loan to value, right? Like, as we talked about here, they only have to hold 10% of the outstanding equity, so they can basically lever, even though it's not true leverage, but they can move it up, basically up to 96% to where they're not really holding that much. I think when you look at that, the risk profile, especially where I only get to get one or maybe a couple of these on here versus buying 100 loans on ground floor, um, it's really hard for me to see why you'd want to make this choice versus just buying debt over there. If you're just looking for that fixed income, even though you do have to continually roll over notes over there. And so, I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons you're locking in, this total return for a long period of time. But at the same time, you're not really, because you're getting, these higher returns in the early years, and so you have to reinvest that somewhere. Uh, so, if we end up in a falling rate environment, you really don't end up any better off. I don't think. I don't know. So and again, well, oh, I always forget. Please like and subscribe. I have links in the description below to all of the places that I invest on. But just because I invest there doesn't mean that you should, right? You should do your own due diligence on Lofty, on ground floor, on the individual investments on each one. Just because I think it makes more sense to just get a portfolio of loans on there versus buying into this one property that looks like a second mortgage, even though maybe it's really not. For me to get excited about this type of deal, I think I would just want to hire rate of return, right? And a lot of people are like, well, I'm getting 15% at first, but you're really not, right? Like one of the things I know some people would think about is, oh, well, let me get 50%, 15%, and then later in the year sell it. Um, I think the fees make it so that doesn't work, right? You're not going to overcome your fees because I don't expect you to get a large appreciation in this where there's a set payoff. Um, and then if you hold it for, a few years, right? The more years you go, the easier it is to overcome fees. But then you end up in a situation where, tokens on Lofty are very much priced relative to, um, what their yield is. And so as that yield shrinks, you're not going to be able to sell these out at par, I wouldn't think, when they're yielding 7.5%. And so that might be another argument for this versus, something on ground floor, where is that, this is liquid, I could turn around and sell it right away. And you can, but I mean, there are, because of fees, there's a large, you end up losing quite a bit by doing that. Um, both on the purchase and sale side, right? And then I don't know. So it's tough for me to understand why this is a popular structure. It clearly is on Lofty because this is selling out faster. Um, there's no real business plan that I have to look at, right? Like I don't have to look at what's the rent for this property because it's just they're paying a certain amount. And obviously what they're paying has nothing to do with what this property would rent for. In a scenario where we ended up taking it back, I think the most likely case is we sell it, right? And so, um, and that's one thing to think about too. If we ended up doing that, I think you make less money. You might have made your yield, but I think you definitely make less money over the course of it because you're not getting um, you're not getting that boost all the way up to the $60 token mark. At least if it's in the early years. If it's later on, I think there's a good chance that the collateral has appreciated significantly more than the 2% appreciation that it's doing. And let me jump into that math real quick. It does. It just drives me crazy sometimes when, if I say there's 2% annual appreciation and I start at $50 and I go up 2% a year, that would get me to $60.95 at the end of the year 10. But we're at 60, right? Which is really looking at a 1.84%, right? So like, well, what happened here? What are they talking? Why do they say 2%? Well, what they're doing is they're saying $10 is 20% of 50, and you're getting in total, you're getting a 10% appreciation or a $10 appreciation. So that's a 20% appreciation. But that's true, right? Your total appreciation was 20% over the 10 years. And so we took the total, we divided it by 10, and we said it's 2% appreciation. And that is just not the way that anybody looks at appreciation when you're talking about real estate, because of course it would naturally compound, right? And so if I'm buying something for 50 now and I'm selling for 60 in the future, if I were going to look at the appreciation rate of that, I would say this is appreciating at 1.84%, not at 2%. Now, it doesn't make a huge difference because it's a small number, right? 2% isn't a huge appreciation rate. And so moving from 2% to 1.84, just not a big difference, but it's just another example of how I really don't like how they handle a lot of the math on here. It's not technically wrong, but it's not, when they say at an annual appreciation rate of 2%, like this is not how anybody thinks of, at least anybody that has experience investing in real estate would not call that a 2% appreciation rate annually. I see that with like a lot of the, and I still am working on the fractional dot app video where I've got, I've just watched several of their deals, and a lot of them will do deals, something kind of like this, where they'll be like, it's a 300% appreciation, but they're really like over 6 years or 8 years, so they're doing the same kind of math. And I think it comes from people who don't, who know how to do math, but don't really understand how investment math works in a traditional sense. I mean, and this is just another example. I mean, this stuff just, it does drive me crazy. I don't know. It's not the end of the world. It's not even making a very big difference in this deal. But it is just aggravating. Like, why not? I would just like us to be right in more of this stuff. And so, like, especially when okay, and so when you look at your projected annual return, 17%, because they're saying 15% plus 2%, well, that's a good projected annual return for this year, but not over the holding period of the investment, right? And so again, I mean, I think that you know, this is why we always have to run our own numbers on anything that they. Well, we should do it on every property on every site, at least until you start to trust the platforms. But I mean, Lofty is just always doing this, where they're just basically saying they're giving you, to call this a projected annual return makes no sense, right? Because it's not what I'm expecting to make every year that I hold this. It maybe they should say projected first year return, and I think then yes, I think we're accurate because we're getting 15% that first year plus 2%. So I don't know. That stuff sort of aside, this is just not a deal that I'm excited about. I think the most likely scenario is you get paid off sometime in here, and then you've really only made, 10 and a half to 11 and a half, maybe 12%. um maybe not, but maybe. And one of the things is it's possible my tax treatment on this income is better than it is on the interests. And so, if I'm doing mortgages, so maybe that's a good argument. Maybe I should look at that a little bit more of how the tax treatment of this works. Um, if there were these other issues, right? Like if I didn't think it is under collateralized, right? Because they brought it to the market at a premium of the collateral, right? So like if they sold out everything, um, that they're allowed to sell out, if they sold 90% of the out, of the available equity, um, that'd be basically 100% of what the appraised value is, right? And then on top of that, um, the Zillow value is worse. Again, usually I'll trust an appraiser over Zillow, but it's still just casts a little bit more doubt. Add into that, I don't know. I just for me, I would just want, if I thought I were getting a 15% actually getting a 15% annual return on this, I'd probably jump right in on it, right? But I think for this amount, I won't. I think it's possible sometime in the future, uh, if they sell out and then somebody needs to liquidate, you can get these at a little bit of a discount. They might start to make some sense. And even I think it's even possible once your yield drops to 7.5 that, depending on how what the price is, it might make sense to even at par start to buy in because you're getting closer to that plop in price, getting that extra $10. So, it is one that I think that I'll probably keep checking in on. If I can get some at a discount, I'll definitely buy it. If I can, sometime in the future, I think there's a lot of potential for this deal to get mispriced sometime around year 4, right? Somebody who's been holding on to it, and now all of a sudden their yield drops and they're thinking, oh man, 7.5%, let me just go ahead and sell this at some sort of discount. I think there'll be potential for it, but I think as it stands today, it's definitely not a deal for me. Sorry about that. I don't know why I'm having extra problems tonight, but it froze again. Yeah, all I was saying is I think at the current, rate of return, it's not really a deal for me. Um, especially whenever I'm doing something that's sort of an untested strategy, I want to get paid extra for that, right? And I really see these, home equity style deals as exactly that. I know there are a few of them on there, but it's, I want to know what happens when things go bad with these deals before, and how quickly we actually get paid back, how it actually works out. If it does get challenged in court, what does that look like? Does the court just, because there's the ability, and this happens in certain different setups where the court says, oh, even though that you're, formally this isn't debt, we're going to treat it like debt because that's how it looks to us. And then they can apply different rules and that, than what we expect, right? And so again, don't take that as legal advice. It is just me rambling about things that I worry about. But it is, to me, it's just an untested structure that I think could possibly not provide us with the, level of security that we think it does. Add on top of that, that I think we're under collateralized if they decide to sell all of it. And even if they don't, again, because, they still hold some equity. And so the way that the risk gets spread, um, I don't like it. We're basically, saying that there's more equity than what was appraised at by 5%. Anyway, that's my take. I know there were a couple people in the Discord, which there is a link to the Discord in the description of this video. I know there were a couple of people in the Discord that liked this deal, thought they were going to get some of it. I'd love to have you jump in and explain what you do like about it. Um, I think that it could be the right deal for some people, but if so, what do you like about this versus investing in mortgages, right? Are you getting better tax treatment? Like, are you thinking, is that making a big part of the difference? And I think that that's possible that it is. But it is the only reason I could think that I would prefer this, to a mortgage with a similar rate on, especially when I get to diversify that across 100 mortgages versus, a couple of these deals on Lofty. Anyway, that's it for me today. Uh, until next time, gonna just keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.